He played the cruelest penguin villain in Batman. He was the chaos inside every room he walked into. 4 feet 10 inches in of pure, undeniable presence, and Hollywood never quite knew what to do with him. But Danny DeVito always knew exactly who he was. What the cameras never caught, what the posters and the award nominations never showed, was the one thing that held all of it together. Not the fame, not the films. A woman from Brooklyn who walked into a small theater one January night in 1971 forgot entirely why she had come and could not look away from the man on that stage. She chose him before the world had any reason to. At 81, Danny DeVito has finally said it out loud. She was the only love of his life. And the story of how he got here through a childhood that should have broken him, a Hollywood that tried to reshape him, and a marriage that refused to end even after it changed forever, is the kind of story that makes you rethink what love is actually supposed to look like. He was born on November 17, 1944 in Neptune, New Jersey. And from the very beginning, the world seemed to be making a point of telling him he wasn't quite what it had in mind. His mother, Julia, was 40 years old when he arrived and had already raised several children. She didn't want another one. Years later, she said it plainly, "I didn't want him, but I'm so proud of him." 4 words of rejection, 6 words of pride, and a little boy left to figure out which ones to carry. Danny carried both of them his whole life. That early sense of not being wanted, of being an afterthought in the house where you were supposed to matter most never fully left him. He pushed against it. He used it, but it was always there. His father was a gentleman during the day, owned a candy shop in Asbury Park, well liked around town. But when the drinking started at night, something shifted. Young Danny learned to read those signs the way children in certain kinds of homes always do. Sometimes he hid in closets. Sometimes he ran to the neighbors. Between 1950 and 1955, police were called to their home. At least 17 times. Danny also carried something nobody could see. He was born with a rare genetic condition called Fairbanks disease, which is why he only grew to 4'10" in, but the height was almost beside the point. The disease attacked his joints, his hips, his knees, his back. By the time he was in his 20s, his pain on any given day sat between a 6 and an 8 out of 10. Hollywood told him to stay quiet about it. Weakness was not marketable, so he kept quiet and he kept going. In New York, he ended up sharing a $75 a month apartment with Michael Douglas, who was quietly keeping to himself that his father was Kirk Douglas. They ate canned beans. They split their last $27 on headshot and walked them across the city by hand. Douglas booked some roles. Danny kept getting rejected. He parked cars. He stood motionless in a clothing store window pretending to be a mannequin. For a stretch, he lived out of his old Volkswagen Beetle and showered at the YMCA. He kept that story private for decades. Hollywood told him repeatedly to change. One studio offered him the equivalent of nearly $1 million in today's money if he would agree to surgery to reshape his face to become something more comfortable for mainstream audiences. He said no. He burned the contract at a beach bonfire. "I'd rather be a first-rate version of myself than a second-rate version of someone else," he told the casting director who pushed him. He meant it completely. By 1970, Danny DeVito was 26 years old, had been rejected more times than he could count, and was carrying a body that hurt in ways he couldn't explain to most people. He had survived a childhood that would have broken plenty of men before they ever got started. He was still standing, but he had not yet. Not in the way that reaches all the way down been truly seen by another person. That was about to change on January 17, 1970. It was one night only, a small off-Broadway play called The Shrinking Bride. Not a landmark production, not the kind of thing that ends up in theater history, just a modest show in a modest venue in New York City. Rhea Pullman had gone to see a friend who was in the cast. That was the only reason she was there. She was 22 years old, born and raised in Bennenhurst, Brooklyn, the daughter of a Polish immigrant who worked in the toy business. She had studied drama at Hunter College, graduated in 1968, and had been waitressing at the Rainbow Room in Rockefeller Center while auditioning for whatever she could find. Sharp, funny, the kind of person who fills a room without needing to raise her voice. She sat down to watch her friend perform, and then she saw him. There was a stocky man on that stage. Not tall, not the kind of face that gets you cast as the Hollywood leading man. And yet he was commanding that room completely. Something in the way he moved, the way he timed every line, The way he existed in his own gravitational field made Rhea Pullman forget entirely why she had come. When the show ended, she asked around, "Did he have a girlfriend?" No, she did not wait for a formal introduction. "I had to meet him immediately," she would say years later, still laughing. "I came on to him big time." After the show, they went to dinner and talked for hours. Danny DeVito, the man who had spent the better part of a decade being told he was wrong in every direction, sat across from this woman from Brooklyn who thought he was the most riveting person she had ever watched on a stage. He would say later that he knew within 22 minutes of meeting her that she was the woman he wanted to spend his life with. Not a possibility, the woman. 2 weeks later, Rhea moved into his Manhattan apartment. 2 weeks, not a month, not a careful courtship. Two people from similar worlds with working-class roots and big ambitions and the specific toughness that comes from never having had anything handed to them, who looked at each other and recognized something they hadn't known they were looking for. They would live together for 11 years before getting married, not because the commitment was uncertain, but because neither of them needed a piece of paper to understand what they already had. His relationship with Michael Douglas, maintained across those difficult years, eventually led to the break that everything else would build on. In 1975, Douglas, now a producer, was making One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, adapted from Ken Kesey's novel, to be directed by Milos Forman. He asked for Danny. Director Forman resisted at first. The studio wanted a bigger name. Douglas held firm. Danny was cast as Martini, a psychiatric patient, a role he had actually played years earlier in a stage version of the same story. He was on screen for 5 minutes and 52 seconds. He left a mark that people are still describing 50 years later. The film won 5 Academy Awards. Danny was not nominated, but he was finally on the map. And then in 1978, Danny made a move everyone in Hollywood told him was professional suicide. He turned down 3 movie roles to audition for a TV sitcom called Taxi. His own agent told him not to do it, but Danny had read the script and knew the same way he had known when he met Rhea in his gut immediately without needing anyone's confirmation. The character was Louis Diploma, a dispatcher, mean, petty, and unapologetically awful in every direction. He walked into that audition and delivered a 7-minute monologue that left the room silent. ABC was nervous about his height. Creator James L. Brooks threatened to quit if they didn't cast him. They cast him. Danny signed the contract without negotiating. Even though it paid 40% less than what the other actors were making, he didn't care. Then in the second season of Taxi, Rhea joined the cast. She played Zena Sherman, Louis D'Alma's girlfriend. The producers had no idea Danny and Rhea had been living together for years. They thought the chemistry was just exceptional acting. It was exceptional acting. It was also two people who knew each other the way very few human beings ever truly know another person. In January of 1982, after 11 years together, they got married, quietly without a production. That same year, Rhea began her role as Carla Tortelli on Cheers, the sharp, wise-cracking barmaid who would make her one of the most beloved actresses on American television. She won 4 Emmy Awards for that role. Danny talked about it the way a man talks when the pride he feels is bigger than any award he ever won himself. In 1983, working at nights and on weekends while still filming Taxi, they quietly started Jersey Films together. Over the next 2 decades, it became one of the most consequential independent production companies in American cinema, producing Pulp Fiction, Aaron Brockovich, Out of Sight, and Garden State, among others. The Pulp Fiction story alone tells you something about how they operated. Quentin Tarantino had been turned down by other studios. Danny and his partners kept the project alive, gave Tarantino's company money and office space, and let him make his film on $8 million. He promised it would look like a $25 million movie. He kept that promise. They did all of this while raising 3 children: Lucy, born in 1983, Grace, born in 1985, and Jacob, born in 1987. They kept a rule for decades. No more than 2 weeks would go by without them working on something creative together, not performing a marriage, building something. The clearest picture of what that partnership looked like was Matilda in 1996. Danny directed it, played the awful Mr. Wormwood, cast Rhea as his equally awful wife, and let their own children appear in small roles. But what audiences never saw was what was happening off camera. The young actress playing Matilda, Mara Wilson, was dealing with her mother's cancer during production. Danny and Rhea quietly became a shelter for her, caring for her the way you care for someone who belongs to you. Before filming was finished, Danny arranged for a near-final cut to be screened at the hospital so Mara's mother could see it before she passed. Mara Wilson would say years later that they felt like her favorite aunt and uncle, that they had made something unbearable slightly more bearable in a way she never forgot. This was the thing that posters and award nominations never quite captured. The man who played monsters on screen was in the quiet parts of his life consistently one of the good ones. Then in October of 2012, after 30 years of marriage and more than 40 years together, Danny DeVito and Rhea Perlman announced their separation. The world reacted as though something had been taken from it. Because in a Hollywood landscape full of relationships that lasted about as long as a press cycle, Danny and Rhea had been proof for millions of ordinary people that something different was possible. Not a performed love story. Two real people from real places who had built a real life, and you could feel the difference. Rhea, speaking years later on Julia Louis-Dreyfus's podcast Wiser Than Me, was honest without being detailed. "I'm not going to sugarcoat it." She said it was very difficult at first. There were a lot of reasons that we separated. She acknowledged that both of them were deeply ambitious, consumed by their work. "He loves to work. I like to work," she said. Some things, she made clear, belong to them and not to the public. But here is what did not happen. They did not divorce. By March of 2013, just 5 months after the announcement, a source close to both of them told People magazine in the simplest possible terms, they love each other, always have and always will. They reconciled. They tried again. They went to therapy. 38 sessions by some accounts. Danny rented out the same restaurant where they had spent one of their early dates. For 4 more.